Happy Tuesday. Thanks for joining me and for giving me 5 to 7 minutes for our morning devotions. We're working through the parables of Jesus. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 13 this morning, verse 52. As you turn there or as you prepare to listen, remind you a couple things about parables. The first one is the crowds came for the miracles, they weren't necessarily coming for the message. And Jesus wanted to teach the kingdom of heaven to those who really wanted to hear. And he wanted people to first recognize that Jesus was the king and that he was the Messiah. And to understand the parables, need to understand that Jesus is the king and he's Messiah, and you need to know who he is to be able to understand the parables. You need to understand the author before you read the book. The second thing is a parable is an earthly story with a heavenly meaning, and Jesus wanted his audience to understand, his disciples to understand what the kingdom of heaven was. He wanted them to understand the spiritual truths that he was teaching them, so he often used object lessons to help them understand an abstract concept. Finally, the parables are found only in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. They're not found in John. So this morning we're going to be in Matthew chapter 13, verse 52. I want to explain the verse and then I'm going to allow you to read that on your own. As Jesus is finishing this round of parables that he's teaching his disciples, he turns to them, he says, "You've heard what I've said, do you understand it?" So the title of this is Knowing and Then Doing. Jesus is asking the disciples if he heard and understood the parables he just taught. Notice, I want to point out the first thing, that Jesus is a very patient person. And he would be able to teach these parables again and again and again if they did not understand. And sometimes when we teach, we become frustrated, or when we parent, we become frustrated because our students or our children, they don't listen the first time, and when we have to tell them twice, we get frustrated. We see Jesus here showing a great deal of patience as he was ministering and teaching the disciples. Oftentimes he would have to teach them again and again and again because they did not learn or they did not understand. Jesus is looking at them saying, "Hey, I've just taught you these parables. Do you understand what's going on? Do you understand?" And it's a reminder for us to be patient as we work with those that don't understand or don't have knowledge. It's a great leadership principle to continue to be patient. And it's a good reminder for us that sometimes we need to reteach a concept, especially if people aren't getting the knowledge and the application. So first challenge there is to be patient. The second challenge, or second thing I want to point out, is that Jesus told them to be like the scribes or like a teacher of the religious law. Back in Jesus' time, the scribes or the teachers of the religious law, it's the same person, depends on which translation you use. They were extremely devoted people. They studied all the time and they had unwavering diligence and devotion to what they were studying. Jesus said, "Now that you've heard it and you understand it and you told me you understand it, I want you to be like the scribe. I don't want you to be like the scribe in that you're zealous for a religion. I want you to be like a scribe and be my disciple in that you're devoted, extremely devoted to me, that you study my words, that you listen to what I teach you, and that you have unwavering devotion and diligence to following me." Jesus is stepping up the bar for what he wants his disciples to do. Jesus wanted the same devotion out of his disciples now that they understood what Jesus taught. Jesus wanted that same devotion, that same study, that same diligence that the disciples would have seen from the scribes. You see how we have a physical example for what Jesus wanted, a physical example for an abstract concept. The disciples were familiar with the scribes. They would have been familiar with what they did, and they would have understood what Jesus was asking. Jesus wanted his disciples to be devoted to his teaching and his message. Jesus challenged the disciples to be like a household owner or a homeowner. Now, in Jesus's days, those would be the people, if you will, like a butler or someone that would be willing to tend to the house. They were to keep the old food fresh, and then they were to keep the new food in stock as well. And they were trying to have that delicate balance of having the old food mixed in with the new food to make a great meal. A homeowner or a household owner would have been responsible to know what to serve, and when it was appropriate to incorporate older food and newer food based upon the menu of the day and the people in attendance. So Jesus takes that and says, you need to be like the homeowner, the one that organizes the food. And he says, you need to be the disciples, the one that study diligently, to have unwavering devotion and to be devoted to what my message and what I'm teaching you. And Jesus is turning to the disciples and he's saying, you need to teach now what you have learned. You need to teach the Old Testament as a background to the New Testament. You need to mix in the old with the new. And Jesus met all the standards, and he wanted people to understand that based upon what the Old Testament said, that he met the old standards and he is here to meet a new standard. And Jesus is looking to his disciples to be able to help get that message out. We as disciples are to teach through both the Old and the New Testament. The Old Testament is basically the Messiah is coming. There's a promised Messiah is coming. Here is what to look for in the promised Messiah. The New Testament says the promised Messiah has come and his name is Jesus. Look, listen, and learn to what he has said. And then Jesus is looking at his disciples saying, teach them the new of who I am. Help them to understand the old of I've met all these requirements that was promised of the Messiah. So Jesus is challenging his disciples, now that you've heard, now that you understand, go and tell. So the application, the homework, if you will, the action we can take is, do you understand what Jesus taught and why he taught and why he came? Do you understand the importance of his death, his burial, and his resurrection? If you don't understand that, then you're not going to be able to go and teach, because Jesus wanted to make sure his disciples knew and understood and were properly applying what he was teaching them. So the first question I have for you is, do you understand who Jesus is? Do you understand what he did? And do you understand why it is so important? That's the foundation of our faith, to understand who and what Jesus did and who and why he did it. So if you don't understand that, please reach out. That's so important for you to understand, because you can't teach what you don't understand. And we all have times of growth and times that we need to understand. And there's no shame in not understanding, but don't not reach out. Double negative there. So please reach out. Please reach out and ask for help, ask for clarification, because I would love to help you to point you to the Bible and point you to Jesus. If you do understand what Jesus said, if you do understand his teachings, are you sharing that with others? Are you helping others to grow in their knowledge of who Jesus was and who Jesus is and what he taught, and how the Old Testament told everyone that the Messiah was coming, and that the New Testament said the Messiah is Jesus Christ? Are you sharing what you know? So 2 questions. Do you know Jesus? And if you don't, reach out. And if you do understand and you do believe, are you reaching out to help others understand and grow in their knowledge? If I can help you in any way, I trust that you'll reach out and that you have a great Tuesday. And I will see you tomorrow morning. Have a great day.